Christianity underwent a vast transformation in social status within the first 400 years. The first stage is that they were considered weird outsiders with a bad reputation. They were completely out of step with ancient Roman culture, and they were viewed with considerable suspicion, as pagan religious practices were so integrated into social life. To not take part in the traditional religion was to make oneself suspect as a neighbor and a citizen. Early Christians called their weekly Sunday meetings love feasts, and oftentimes these were held in secret. They called each other brother and sister because they considered themselves a kind of new family founded by Jesus, and they greeted each other with a kiss. At these weekly love feasts, they said that in some sense the bread and wine were the body and blood of Jesus. If you're a dirty-minded outsider, you're going to look at these three things and think incest. And you're going to look at these two things and you're going to say cannibalism. In the first 2 centuries, and sometimes beyond, Christians were periodically accused of holding secret orgies and of practicing not only incest and cannibalism, but sometimes infanticide. I'm not sure where they got that from. Clearly, little was known of them among the wider public, and the imagination took over with bad results. There were sporadic persecutions under various Roman emperors. For the most part, these ended during the reign of Diocletian. In these years, despite the low social status, Christianity spread all throughout the empire, and especially throughout the cities. They were persecuted, but this just drove them closer together. And you had to be serious to be a member of a group like that. You had to be dedicated. They were close-knit, and they supported one another in many ways. A second stage was toleration. The Emperor Constantine, who had himself converted to Christianity, changed official policies so that Christianity was legally recognized. He didn't make it the official religion. The Edict of Milan in 313 declared official tolerance for Christianity. It was issued by Constantine and also his co-emperor, Licinius, who ruled in the West. Still at this time, the great majority within the Roman Empire held to the traditional religion. The third stage was domination. As time went on, it became fashionable to be a Christian, and a portion of the ruling class even converted to it, and some emperors favored it by policy. This reached a high point, or a low point, depending how you look at it, in the reign of the Emperor Theodosius the First. In a series of edicts from 379 to 395, Emperor Theodosius did the following things. He declared Catholic Christianity the only legitimate religion. He ended state support for traditional Roman religion. He deposed other Christian bishops who didn't meet his criteria for being Catholic. In doing this, he was enforcing a decision made at a church council in Constantinople in 381. We'll talk about that in the next lecture, what that dispute was all about. This was a huge change. This was a change that nobody saw coming in the early years. This was something, frankly, that neither Christians nor anyone else could imagine in the 100s. Theodosius the First was also the last emperor to rule a unified empire. After his reign, there was an Eastern emperor based in Constantinople and also a Western emperor based in Rome, with the Roman Empire split into 2. To summarize a complex and confusing period, the Western Empire, the empire based in Rome, unsuccessfully battled various Germanic, so-called barbarian invaders in the 400s and the 500s. The empire was just too big. Despite the valiant efforts of many emperors over many decades, they just couldn't hold such a big empire against these growing and powerful tribes. Eventually, they defeated the Western Empire and carved up its remains into different kingdoms. But they ended up, interestingly, adopting the religion of the people they conquered. The Western Empire then, as it fell apart, eventually became a bunch of different, smaller empires, which were Christian. The division of empire into West and East reflected also a difference of language and culture. Western-style Christianity, which used a Latin liturgy, eventually evolved into what we call Roman Catholicism. And the distinctive mark of Roman Catholicism is the unique authority of the papacy, that is, the Bishop of Rome. And the papacy continued to gain power and to make greater claims for itself right up through the High Middle Ages. By the High Middle Ages, the papacy had become so powerful that it was constantly in tension with secular kings. This kind of Christianity used the language of the Roman Empire, and it also used the Bible in various Latin translations, the most famous of which is the Latin Vulgate, the common Latin version, done by the famous scholar and monk Jerome. This area underwent a period of severe instability due to periodic invasions by different groups of people until the 900s. This is sometimes called the Dark Ages in Europe. Still, during this time, monastic communities of monks and nuns, became a central part of the civilization, and they provided a source of stability, source of learning. Those communities contributed to the building of cathedrals. They provided communication networks. They developed hospitals. They trained preachers and priests. And eventually, they were involved in forming universities, the ancestor institutions of universities in the modern world. The eastern half of the Roman Empire continued on for some time as a unified whole. This became what historians call the Byzantine Empire. This area was pretty big until they lost much of it to Islam starting in the 7th century. After that, it was a very small area based in Constantinople. Still, it lasted continuously as an Eastern Christian land until it was captured by the Turks in 1453. Originally, Eastern Orthodox churches used the Greek language and had a Greek liturgy. As time went on, they developed liturgies in their different languages in their areas, such as Slavonic. Still, they weren't officially split with the Western Church until the year 1054. Some differences from Western Christianity are as follows. First, their official Bible is the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament, the ancient Jewish Greek translation of the Old Testament, together with the same Greek New Testament that other Christians acknowledge. Their governance is different. Today, Eastern Orthodoxy is a group of self-governing national churches, so a church for each country, each led by various patriarchs and metropolitans. Those are the higher-level bishops. So there's the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church, for instance. Here on this stamp is a recent patriarch of Moscow, head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Although they accept the same early councils and traditions as Western Christianity, they differ somewhat from Roman Catholicism in various doctrines. They have a doctrine of real presence in the bread and the wine rather than a doctrine of transubstantiation. And they consider themselves to be the genuinely apostolic Christian church, the church which is truly and correctly traced back to the apostles. To them, Orthodoxy is Christianity, and the Pope and the Western Christians split from them, and not vice versa. In our next segment, some further splits within mainstream Christianity.